The archetypes of Yu-Gi-Oh! Distinguish themselves in many different ways and for different reasons. Some are powerful game disruptors. Some are famous icons. Some have uniquely memorable aesthetics. But others are completely forgotten or have one single good card that'll make you say, oh yeah, I forgot there were more. And that's probably the case that comes with the Mask Beasts. The line of Mask Beast cards are unified by a shared aesthetic and the vague concept of locking your opponent out of doing things while slowly whittling them down with burn. In fact, they interact with each other so little that it's a bit of a stretch to call them an archetype at all. But there's enough connection between these cards that we can talk about what they are, why they don't work, and what they could be. Starting off with the monsters, we have the Mask Beast, a level 8 Dark Ritual Fiend from the 2003 set Labyrinth of Nightmare. Actually, most of the Mask cards come from Labyrinth of Nightmare, with 2 exceptions that we'll be going over soon. But first, the original Mask Beast. It's got a pretty clunky stat line of 2300 attack and 1800 defense, making it able to beat over most cards you'd see in 2003, and every ritual card that had been released to the game yet. But outside of its ferocious attack, the Mask Beast doesn't do anything. It has no effect other than its summon conditions, which are pretty steep, since it's a ritual monster with no archetypal shortcuts to offset the cost. Luckily, the other Mask monsters are a little easier to get on the field. Melchid the Four-Faced Beast and Grand Tiki Elder are both level 4 Dark Fiend normal monsters with 1500 attack. Melchid has 400 more defense than Grand Tiki Elder, but that brings it out to an unremarkable 1200. At the time of the release of the Labyrinth of Nightmare, these two fiends weren't really part of the Mask cards. Masks feature in both of their card arts, but if that was the only criteria for getting a mention here, we'd have to talk about Mask Dragon, Mask Sorcerer, Mask Clown, and a bunch of other unrelated cards. But in 2007, the TCG got Mask Beast Guardius in the special edition Tactical Evolution set. Guardius has been part of the OCG since 2001, where it released only a few months after the Ritual Mask Beast. The TCG would have to wait about 4 years after the first line of Mask cards to get their best monster, which is unfortunate because that means Mask Beast Guardius is not a legal card for the 2005 time-gated GOAT format. Probably the only place where it might have seen play. Still, it's a pretty neat card. Mask Beast Guardius is a level 8 Dark Fiend monster with 3300 attack and 2500 defense, so it's very strong once it hits the field. Although lacking inherent protections, Mask Beast Guardius does have a floating effect to make your opponent think twice before destroying it. When Guardius goes from field to grave, you can activate the Mask of Remnants from your deck, targeting an opponent's monster, and we'll get to that card in a second when we cover the Mask Spell and Trap support. Mask Beast Guardius was easier to summon than the Mask Beast. Like any other level 8, Guardius requires 2 tributes, but doesn't use your normal summon. Instead, Guardius can special summon itself from your hand by tributing 2 monsters you control, as long as one of those monsters is either Melchid the Four-Faced Beast or Grand Tiki Elder, finally justifying that they are in fact part of the Mask Beast cards. And that's it for the Mask Beast monsters. 3 effectless cards and a boss that was released too late to see any play in GOAT format. But there are Mask spells too, and they're a little bit better. Some of them. One of them is not, and it's Mask of Dispel. It's a continuous spell that selects another face-up spell in the field, and it doesn't negate that spell or impact it in any way, but it does burn your opponent for 500 life points during each of your standby phases. When the chosen spell leaves the field, so does Mask of Dispel. Quite predictably, this card has seen almost no experimentation. It's slow and basically does nothing, which kinda fits with its card art. There's not really anything going on with this featureless mask other than an expression of hollow despair. Next up, we have Curse of the Mask Beast, the ritual spell which can summon the Mask Beast. There are no bells or whistles here, folks. This is just your standard 2003 ritual spell with no additional effects to support your expensive ritual monster once it hits the field, or make its cost less painful to pay. Moving on to a card that actually has seen a small amount of competitive play, we have Mask of the Accursed. After this equipped spell pairs with the monster, that target is unable to attack. Additionally, the controller of that monster will take 500 damage during each of your standby phases. As an equipped spell with no self-protections, it's a pretty easy tech to dodge. In the modern game, clearing your own field for an Xyz or Link monster is pretty easy, and even in 2003, you could still get out your curse situation by tributing the afflicted monster. Still, this card is better than Mask of Dispel, because it's a stall card as well as burn. If your opponent has no way to out their own monsters, they're stuck with a useless body that will slowly chip away their own life points. The incremental pain and debilitation of Mask of the Accursed effects is communicated by the nails that have been driven through the blinded mask in its card art. Next is a mask equip spell that doesn't really fit the whole mask theme, as far as the mask cards even have one. Mask of Brutality is an equip spell that increases the attack of your monster by 1000 points, but decreases their defense by the same amount. You'll also have to pay 1000 life points during each of your standby phases if you want to keep the card around. The way the artwork for Mask of Brutality shows sharp claws protruding from its eyes is really cool, and evokes the spirit of its effect. More attack at cost equals claws instead of eyes. What this card doesn't do is burn your opponent or restrict their ability to act. It kind of gels with the Mask Beast in that it's all about a big attack, but overall this contribution to the Mask line is not very noteworthy. Our final Mask spell is the Mask of Remnants. Since it only works with Mask Beast Guardius, it makes sense that it released with the Tactical Evolution Special Edition alongside the biggest mass monsters. When the Mask of Remnants is activated from your hand, all it does is shuffle itself back into your deck. You never want to see the card in your draw, but at least it's kind of a garnet that resets itself so it's not completely dead. But when the Mask of Remnants is activated from your deck by the graveyard effect of Mask Beast Guardius, it becomes an equip spell that causes control of its target to switch. You probably wouldn't choose to do this, but it's worth noting there are no restrictions on where you choose to direct the Mask of Remnants when it comes from your deck. If you have a monster that you really want to give to your opponent, you can have your vanquished Mask Beast Guardius float your other monsters to your opponent's field. Consequently, your opponent could also counter your Remnant by redirecting it with Fairy's Hand Mirror or even Tailor the Fickle. The artwork of the Mask of Remnants is pretty cool, taking inspiration from its effect. Clawing its way out of the outer mask is another mask in an inner layer, reflecting the way the spirit of the Mask Beast Guardius reaches out of the grave to steal control of the target. Time for the mask traps, starting with the bad one. Mask of Weakness is a normal trap that, when activated, causes an attacking monster to lose 700 attack points until the end of the turn. You're not really getting a lot of mileage out of this card, although the way the mask itself is adorned with a pinned doll is pretty eerie. Shockingly though, Mask of Weakness does have a competitive placement from August of 2019, when it took a top 8 at the San Luis Regional in the side deck of a Paleozoic Frog strategy. So that's pretty cool. It was also alright in the speed dual sealed play, where generic battle traps performed better. And at last, we come to it, a mask card with an enormous amount of competitive representation because it's one of the early Yu-Gi-Oh! Classic floodgates. While Mask of Restrict is face up, neither player can tribute cards. Out of the gate, this pairs well with Mask of Accursed, because it stops your opponent from outing your burn spells by tributing their monster. But that's not why it's seen so much play. Floodgates ebb and flow with the slow cycle of Yu-Gi-Oh's metagame, with use of specific ones rising during times when dominant decks rely on the mechanic they counter. There are some historically troublesome strategies that Mask of Restrict shuts down, like Klee, Monarchs, and Fluenderies, amongst others, as well as basically any ritual deck. On top of being a frequently used floodgate, as the cover card for Labyrinth of Nightmare set, Mask of Restrict is one of the very few set covers that isn't a monster, a league that also includes Last Turn from Legacy of Darkness, and Deck Devastation Virus from Flaming Eternity, which you can just barely see behind the Sacred Phoenix of Nephthys. While most of these cards are legal in gold format, what little usage the original Mask Beast sees there is often because it happens to share its dark attribute with fellow level 8 Ritual Fiend Zera the Mant, meaning both can be brought out with Contract with the Abyss while fulfilling the full tribute cost for each other. Melchid, the Four-Faced Beast, and Grand Tiki Elder, on the other hand, have not enjoyed this same niche usability. Tragic, but you'd probably pair Blue Eyes Toon Dragon with the Mask Beast and Goat before bringing in either of the low-level masks, since Toon Dragon is searchable by Toon Table of Contents and has the useful tribute fodder of level 8. If Guardius were legal, Mask Beast decks would probably use Mystic Tomato to bring out Tiki Elder and Melchid, but in more modern variants of the deck, Summoner Monk can serve the same purpose more impactfully. As a generic ritual that's levels too high for preparation of rites, the Mask Beast loves pre-preparation, a very helpful card that searches both the Mask Beast and Curse of the Mask Beast. And even though it didn't enter the TCG until 2016, it was included in the Mask Beast deck in the Speed Duel Battle City box product. Because all the Mask monsters are Fiend, Dark Necrophore can capitalize on Melchids and Grand Tiki Elders in Grave, which is kinda fun, because it's like Yami Bakura and Merrick are teaming up again. And since the Mask monsters are all Dark Fiends, this opens up space for their use in Chaos strategies. Senju of the 1,000 Hands and Manju of the 10,000 Hands can search the Mask Beast while providing a light counterpart for your Dark monsters, opening the way for powerful cards like Chaos Sorcerer and Blackluster Soldier Envoy of the Beginning. But ultimately, the Mask Beast cards don't work because they don't work together. They printed together, at least in the OCG, and they were used together by the rare hunters Loomis and Umbra in the Duel Monsters anime during a tag duel that put Yugi and Kaiba in a tough spot. But the interaction between these cards is so minimal, it's almost non-existent. Other than the light synergy between Mask of the Accursed and Mask of Restrict, and Guardius' mandatory tribute requirements, there's not really a reason you choose to pair any of these cards with each other. Mask of Dispel can stack its paltry burn on top of the Accursed, but realistically that's not going to amount to anything. You'd be better off running Lava Golem or Volcanic Queen to tribute away your opponent's monsters before dropping the Mask of Accursed / Mask of Restrict combo to neutralize the new threat while stacking its burn. The other reason why the Mask cards fail is, again, just poor timing. Mask Beast Guardius might have been a pretty good, or at least rogue viable strategy in GOAT if it weren't for its delayed introduction into the TCG. In the end, the masks are, at the time of writing the script, just another of Konami's forgotten archetypes. Other cards from the Battle City era have seen waves of modern support, including the Amazonas lines, the Jinzos, and even the legendary Fisherman has 2 upgraded versions. So it honestly wouldn't be a surprise if in time we do see an updated mask archetype a la Red Eyes Black Full Metal Dragon and Max Metamorph, because those 2 cards have some commonalities with the masks. They were both featured in the anime, and they both have a strong conceptual identity that hasn't yet translated to the actual game. Bandit Keith's Machines, and therefore Joey's Red Eyes Black Metal Dragon, had an immunity to spell effects that was never a component in the original line of Metamorph cards. This provided a strong initial vector for what to do with their retrans, where Max Metamorph confers immunity to both effect destruction and targeting by monsters and spells. In the anime, the mask cards were persistent 4s that were pretty effective at making Yugi and Kaiba's cards useless while slowly draining their life points. Loomis's Mask of Accursed nullifies Beta the Magnet Warrior, and when Yugi attempts to tribute it for Beast of Gilfer, Loomis reveals Mask of Restrict. In the anime, Mask of Dispel actually did negate the spell it targeted, making it a much better card. A modern take on Mask of Dispel might see it become a continuous trap, able to activate in response to a spell to negate the effect. If a normal spell is negated, maybe it even gets frozen on the field to clutter up your opponent's zones, and open up the amount of situations where Dispel would be useful. Mask Beast Guardius is already pretty decent, and with more methods of fielding Melchid the Four-Faced Beast and Grand Tiki Elder, it would get even better. But here's something these cards are missing, a response to the Mask of Remnants. Retraining the mask monsters to have some kind of effect when Remnants is played from the hand would give the archetype a new direction while allowing players to use nostalgia cards. And there's actually a few more mask cards from the anime that never crossed into print. First would be the continuous spell Masked Doll, which was able to nullify the life point payments and burns of Loomis and Umbra's mask cards. After Loomis used his Mask of Brutality to increase the attack of Shining Abyss, Umbra followed up with Masked Doll so that his partner wouldn't have to pay the maintenance costs. With Mask of Brutality currently being the only mask card to have a form of its own life drain, there's not really a reason to ever use or even print Masked Doll. But new masks might create space for this card, or one like it. More offensive masks that extort a high cost from the player would justify a damage sink like Masked Doll, and new support could even find a way to force that doll and all of its absorbed damage onto your opponent. You could even use the Mask of Remnants, or maybe an adaptation of our second anime exclusive Masquerade. This card is a normal spell that allows you to take control of a monster equipped with a mask, and does give a little more potential mileage to Mask of Brutality, in that you could power your opponent's monsters and then use Masquerade to steal it. But that wasn't how Umbra used Masquerade in the anime. After the demise of Mask Beast Guardius, Loomis used the Mask of Remnants to take control of Yugi's Valkyrion the Magna Warrior, by far the strongest monster around. Maybe Loomis and Umbra could have used Valkyrion to pull off a victory, but instead they started BMing each other, and Umbra used Masquerade to steal Valkyrion from Loomis. This didn't work out super well for either of them, but it does pave the way for the future mask cards to address the failings of the earlier, barely an archetype. More masks would branch into more use cases for Masquerade, which as a potential in-archetype snatch steal could be the start of something interesting. So, if the Mask Beast cards were pretty unremarkable in the TCG, what about in other formats? Well, as mentioned earlier, they got a deck in the Speed Duel Battle City box that came with the skill card Spell of Mask. This card could be activated once per duel and give you a choice between 2 effects. You can resolve the first option when your ritual summon, the Mask Beast, is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, allowing you to float into Mask Beast Guardius. Your second choice tributes a copy of Mask Beast Guardius in your control to add a copy of the Mask Beast and Curse of the Mask Beast from deck or grave to hand. This skill didn't bring too much to the deck, as both skill effects required you to first bring out one of your Mask Beasts the hard way. But attributing your Mask Beast as Guardius to gather the resources for the Mask Beast ritual would be a neat way to trigger the Mask of Remnants for a steal while readying your next boss summon. In Duel Links, Loomis and Umbra got access to plenty of mask skills. Spell Dispel lets Mask of Dispel finally negate spells. Mask Exchange lets you send a Mask of Remnants from hand to bottom of deck while searching Mask Beast as Guardius. Curse of Remnant increases the attack of monsters equipped with that mask. And Mask of Restrict, Skill Edition, can place a face-up Mask of Restrict if you control either the Mask Beast or Mask Beast as Guardius. But Loomis and Umbra's most interesting mask skill is Masked Tribute. By returning one card from hand to deck, you can randomly place in defense position Melchid the Four-Faced Beast or Grand Tiki Elder to your field from outside the game. This skill also locked you out of summoning other monsters than Mask Beast as Guardius, but didn't prevent you from swapping control of monsters, or from summoning however you chose before activating the skill, which opened up some cheeky plays. One move was to make whatever plays you needed before dropping a card to access either Melchid or Tiki Elder, and then using the spell Creature Seizure to swap your free normal monster for one of your opponent's good ones. This actually synergized surprisingly well with Red Eye's decks. The spell Red Eye's Fusion would easily be searched by cards like Red Eye's Insight, and the deck had a decent amount of draw power thanks to cards of the Red Stone. The trouble with Red Eye's Fusion is that it locks you out of summoning other monsters. But placing a monster with a skill was a way around this stipulation. By using Red Eye's Fusion to summon your Red Eye's boss on turn 2, you could follow up this play by activating Mass Tribute followed by Creature Seizure. But gimmick strats aside, while it was never the strongest skill, Mass Tribute did turn Mask Beast as Guardius plus any normal summon into a 3300 beater with a floating steal, a consistency boost that the mask cards very badly needed. And that's about it for the masks. They're not doing it a lot right now, but as we've seen, being a mostly forgotten card from the Duel Monsters era isn't really a bad thing. In time, we may all don the mask, but until then, I'm TheDuelLogs and this video is over.